You're not imagining it. You are inside a spell. And if you've been feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or like something invisible is pulling the strings behind everything you see, you're not alone. What you're about to learn isn't theory. It's a pattern, a divine technology, the system beneath every system. This is the Enneagram, not as a personality test, but as a spiritual engine, the face of God and the master of all systems. If you're new to me or need more context before we go deeper, I encourage you to watch the last masterclass, because from here on out, and as always, we're not retracing old steps, we're moving forward. This is a master level spell, a divine structure that models transformation itself, and it's being used against you, but it can also be used for you. This is your invitation to stop being spellbound and start becoming the spellcaster. Before we go any further, I want to tell you something that I've never said out loud before. This masterclass wasn't born from books or lectures. It wasn't handed down by a teacher or assembled from secondhand wisdom. It was forged through my own transformation, pulled from the rubble of collapse, refined through intuition, and sharpened by lived experience. It came through me, not all at once, but in fragments, in dreams, in patterns, in relentless pursuit of what I knew to be true, not just in my mind, but in my body and spirit. I had experienced it across all levels of my being, even if I didn't yet have the words to explain it. And I still struggle to convey the seriousness and power of this. When I created the Ritual of Light, I was building something that worked, something I could feel in my bones, but I couldn't yet name. It wasn't until I later discovered the Enneagram and then studied Gurdjieff's fourth way that I realized what I had done. I had intuited a legitimate, high-level system, not borrowed, not mimicked, authored from within. And the science backing it is truly only surface level. This goes so much deeper than where modern science can go. And when I combined it with the Enneagram for the 44-day challenge, it became something even more powerful, a living, breathing way to track your transformation in real time. Today's class is about working that Enneagram both forward and backward, because that's how we complete the circuit of change. It's how we spiral, not loop. And here's a quick example of how that looks in my life. I ran the process forward with will and force, but it wasn't until I integrated, reflected, softened, received, that the change became permanent. That's the backwards motion, the inward pull. It's going to look different for you. We are all unique expressions of the divine pattern. So throughout this class, I'm going to show you a variety of real-world examples, personal, practical, and powerful. We're also going to explore how this master spell can be used for expansion or manipulation. Because while there's no such thing as good or evil in absolute terms, there are outcomes, constructive or destructive, aligned or distorted. This isn't unlike what Napoleon Hill was doing with Think and Grow Rich, except I'm decoding this for literally anything you could ever desire. This is a universal engine, a structure of manifestation, expansion, and energetic movement. And yes, that kind of power can be dangerous, which is why it's important to say this clearly. I do not teach from ego. I do not teach for applause. I teach to activate. And the truth is, only those with a certain moral threshold should go any further. This class holds powerful information, knowledge that has been hidden, warped, or selectively passed down through secret societies and spiritual lineages. Once you see this pattern, once you begin to work it, it will change you. And once you are aligned with it, there's no turning back. You can no longer use it out of integrity because it will not let you. So yes, I'm casting pearls, but not to swine, because anyone who reaches this point, who resonates with this work, who takes the time to step inside this spell and walk with it, is already carrying the seed of transformation. You're here because you're ready to wield this responsibly, to restore balance, to complete the cycle. The pendulum has swung far into distortion. Collectively, we've been stuck in the negative octave, repeating patterns and echoing wounds. But by increasing awareness, by learning the system and working it with intention, we generate momentum. And when the pendulum swings back, it will rise, an octave up, a spiral forward. And now I'm living in the realization that I've been working my own bigger Enneagram backward for integration. Because here's the deeper truth. All Enneagrams must be worked both forward and backward to complete the circuit. Forward is about will, about creating change. Backward is about integration, digesting the wisdom, embodying the shift. We'll get into the full structure of that later, but just know if you've only ever moved forward, you've only run half the spell. Everything I've gathered lately is spiraling into clarity, showing me how deep this pattern truly runs. I was running on intuition, pure download, pure pattern recognition, and somehow I nailed it. I built the spiral framework. I ran the law of 3 and the law of 7. I taught a method of transformation that worked because it was true. But I didn't know it was the 4th way, not until much later. The ritual of light itself is a 4th way practice. I intuited it through lived experience, not knowing that what I was building aligned perfectly with Gurdjieff's framework, but with one key difference. Because we have access to science and greater awareness today, the brutal methods he once taught are no longer required. We can walk this path with intention, compassion, and clarity. It wasn't until I began studying the Enneagram in depth and traced it back to its modern origin that I realized I had discovered the 4th way on my own and distilled it into an objective, repeatable system. The ritual became a method to not only embody the 4th way, but to fuse it with the Enneagram in real time through the challenge. It allows us to track and shift energetic spirals as they happen, creating lasting change instead of short-lived insight. And now I'm going even deeper into the Enneagram than ever before. I didn't know fully that what I had created already aligned with high magical systems because I'm not a member of any secret occult societies or orders. I think of myself more as like a hedge witch, as I have no formal lineage or ties. Then something rad happened. A friend of mine who happens to be a Freemason and had watched the previous masterclass, studied the breakdown, and basically said, you know, this is basically what they teach in Freemasonry, right? Just presented in a different way. And while I wasn't entirely surprised, it was validating because I'd never been formally trained in any of these systems. And yet I had built one, something that stands up under scrutiny, esoteric, energetic, and sacred. I got the high magic stamp of approval. But here's the thing, that masterclass, that was me showing you how the car works, the gears, the engines, the systems underneath, the divine tech that powers transformation. You learn how to drive in the ritual of light itself. But this class, this is where I teach you how to read the map, because even the most powerful vehicle is useless if you're driving in circles or worse, following someone else's route. This is the navigation system they don't want you to know about. This is how you reclaim the wheel, consciously, intentionally, and with precision. Before I knew what this was, I was caught in it, like you probably have been or are right now. I grenaded my entire life. I literally blew it up by unknowingly abusing the very forces I now work with. I pushed way too hard. White magic abused, burnout, overworking, spiritual bypasses. I avoided my shadow, black magic repressed, drinking, avoiding stillness, ignoring my truth. Misunderstood sacrifice, red magic corrupted. I gave up myself to be helpful, useful, good. I ran the Enneagram forward only, and like every corrupted system, I collapsed because it wasn't just that I was pushing too hard or refusing to rest. I was building on a distorted foundation. I was using everything, white, black, and red magic in unbalanced, unconscious ways. And because of that, my integrations were incomplete, blocked, distorted, like trying to download a file with a broken link. What should have become wisdom became confusion. What should have rooted into clarity only tangled deeper. The system still ran because the Enneagram always runs. But without the backward spiral, without true integration, I was recycling pain disguised as growth. But now I see it clearly. I know the terrain, and that's why I'm teaching this. If the first masterclass was the what, this is the how it's being used. The last class taught the Enneagram as a system of transformation. It broke down the moon cycles, the types of magic, the 44-day spiral, and how to work it with intention. It gave you the medicine for personal evolution. This class, this is the diagnosis of the disease. This is where we shine the light on how that sacred system is being weaponized, why most people stay stuck in cycles they didn't create, and how to reclaim your will from forces that have hijacked it. You don't need to go back if you're brand new, but if you want to understand the engine in full, you can watch the original masterclass after this, because we don't go backward. We spiral forward and inward at the same time.
So let me show you now what this actually looks like in the wild, because this isn't just spiritual theory, it's a living system already running through your life. So let's, real quick, before we begin, let's take a couple deep breaths in, hold, and out. In, hold, and out. We're anchoring our nervous system to receive, and in and out. All right, you want proof? Look at your phone right now. You open Instagram, right? And a post that says something to the effect of, "You're the chosen one. Everything is aligning. Just trust," right? So this is how it's used. White magic here, it's manufactured will, love and light, right? Fake certainty. Then we've got black magic. This is the shadow bypass. This is where doubt becomes weakness. And we've got red magic here. This is distorted sacrifice. You're told to give more, trust more, surrender more until there's nothing left, right? So if you're in any one of these unbalanced, you see this message, and it feels like the truth, right? But what you're actually caught in is a spell, because this system, the Enneagram spiral and the laws of 3 and 7, is being run on you. And when someone else is running the spiral and you don't even know it's there, you're not transforming, you're looping. So let's break this down. First, let's go over a couple of things. Burnout culture is a spell. Push harder, rest is weakness, you are what you produce. White magic is abused here. Black magic is erased, and red magic is twisted into self-erasure. You're told to give, hustle, manifest, but never to receive or sacrifice from alignment. Another example here are election cycles. They sell you hope, white. They stir up fear, black, and offer a shallow version of change without true collective sacrifice. You get all the emotional highs, the drama, the disillusionment, and by the end, you're back where you started, looped, not liberated. Another example here are trauma healing spaces. They often hijack the spiral. Not all the time, but a lot of time, if you've had this experience with therapy, you're told to do the work over and over, but there's no map, there's no direction, no exit. Just this endless excavation with no integration. You become addicted to your healing, and allergic to completion. So now let's zoom out a little bit more. So let's talk about cults, spiritual movements, and manipulative communities in general. So this includes high demand evangelical systems. This includes MAGA ideology, as well as Nazi ideology and other forms of political extremism. This also includes new aged influencers turned authoritarian and light worker movements with like pyramid shaped power structures. So like the 144 and star seeds and anything that puts humans on different levels. These systems promise that we have the truth, we are the chosen, they are the enemy, right? They offer you identity, white. They isolate you from dissent, black, and demand loyalty disguised as love, red. And just like that, you've entered a loop, a closed spiral that feels like ascension, but is really entrapment. Because here's the secret. All cults run on an unbalanced Enneagram. They weaponize the laws to manipulate. Will becomes coercion. Shadow becomes shame. And sacrifice becomes submission. You are no longer expanding, you're conforming. The spiral didn't just disappear. It can't. It got hijacked. So what looks like community becomes coercion. What feels like purpose becomes programming. What started as devotion becomes dependency. And you don't even realize you're inside a spell. Not until something breaks. Not until you ask, why does it still hurt even though I've done everything right? That's the moment where the spell cracks. And when it does, that's when you're ready to reclaim it. So now that you've seen outside the spell, let's show you how to cast on your own. With balance, with truth, with full awareness of the structure behind the structure, right? Because the spiral is yours to wield. So let's keep going here. Before we go any further, we need to take a breath and recenter, because from this point on, the spell gets more layered. So breathe in, hold, and out. All right. If you're new here, this is your reminder to go back and watch the previous masterclass. That's where I broke down the mechanics of the three forces of magic, white, black, and red, and how they fuel transformation. I'm not here to repeat myself. I'm here to build, but here's the quick pulse check. White magic, will, spark of creation. Black magic, void, the womb of becoming. Red magic is alchemy, the sacrifice that completes the cycle. These forces are not moral, they are mechanical. There's no good or evil, they just are. Like fire, water, and air, they can sanctify or destroy. They are how everything is made, and when misused, they're how people get stuck in loops that feel like growth but only deepen distortion. Now enter the wild card. So we haven't talked about chaos magic until now because you needed the foundation first. But this is where things get interesting. Chaos magic says to burn the rule book. Don't want to chant? Frickin' don't chant. They reject the rules. Cool. They claim sovereignty. Hell yeah, they do. They say, this is my truth, and follow their intuition, which I freaking love that. But they never learn the laws, because while tradition may be a cage, the law of 3 and the law of 7 are the current of life itself. They don't just apply to magic, they apply to everything. Want to mix Reiki with Psalms and quantum theory? Freaking cool, do it. Don't care what tradition says you're supposed to do? Awesome. If it works, it freaking works. But here's the catch. You can ignore the rules all you want, but you cannot escape the laws. And this is where most chaos magicians and most spiritual seekers end up wrecking themselves. Your relationship cycles, your creative process, your healing journey, even your nervous system regulation. So when someone says chaos magic, like it's a free-for-all, I smile and I ask, are you honoring the current or are you just flailing in the flood? because you are on an Enneagram right now, always. The only question is are you steering it or is it steering you? If you have ever mixed traditions without waiting for permission, if you've ever trusted your gut over your guru, broken the rules to protect your soul, or created something no one else could understand, then congratulations, my lovely. You are already a chaos magician. Woohoo! Crack the bubbly. But now it's time to become a master. Not just intuitive, not just powerful, but precise. That's what this work is. It's not spaghetti against the wall. It's not spells that might stick. It's not power that fizzles when the mood shifts. This is structure. This is law. This is divine math. And the Enneagram, it's the code behind all of it. It's the map. You don't need to follow rules, but if you learn the laws, you can bend reality itself. And that's what we're about to do next. So we've got chaos magic, right? Belief is a tool. You can adopt any paradigm temporarily to create an outcome. You've got manifestation culture, right? What you believe, you receive. You can shift reality, but by aligning your vibration or mindset. In both, belief equals leverage. And just like in chaos magic, collective belief systems in manifestation communities often unintentionally birth egregores. These are energetic entities or patterns that begin to take on a life of their own. So let's talk about some real world manifestation egregores so that you can kind of understand what I'm talking about here. The first one is the lucky girl syndrome. So this is the everything always works out for me, and it becomes this viral sentiment. So people start scripting, repeating affirmations. There's all these trendy journals, and they're just collectively reinforcing a worldview that rewards optimism and delusional confidence. And while this is helpful to some, it also begins to create shame and dissonance for anyone not experiencing ease, creating a split reality. This is what they're talking about, the timelines and things like that, but I'm not going to get too much into that. Next one is the money is just energy. So initially this is empowering, but often it's used to gaslight financial insecurity or just justify manipulative pricing practices. And it's often used to deflect accountability, framing scarcity as misalignment instead of recognizing the deeper patterns at play. This belief can become a shield used to explain away financial pain without examining the energetic, systematic, or even manipulative forces that may be involved. This egregore gets summoned anytime someone says, if you're aligned, the money would flow. It sounds empowering, right? But often bypasses the real work of integration, nuance, and nervous system regulation. The last one we're going to touch on today is the don't claim that spell loop. So this is like any expression of pain is labeled as a manifesting negativity, right? This creates a culture of spiritual bypassing, and people become scared to even name their truth, which feeds an egregore of suppression masked as positivity. So just like chaos magic warns, you can throw out the rules, right? But you cannot escape the laws. If the laws of 3 and 7 aren't honored, even the most beautiful beliefs become distorted over time. What starts as empowerment becomes manipulation. What starts as freedom becomes control. What starts as healing becomes a loop. So what this means in practice is if you're participating in collective belief systems, whether it's manifestation, religion, politics, or magic, you are also feeding something. That something can absolutely become an egregore or a demon or whatever you want to call it. I don't like demon because it's got a couple of different definitions. I like egregore. Anyway, unless you are consciously choosing the structure, direction, and energy of what you're feeding, it may start feeding on you. And this is where you start to downward spiral. So this is how to break the spell. First, we've got to recognize that you've been unconsciously fueling. Then we need to reclaim your authority. Ask, is this belief still serving me? Then we retreat from systems that demand allegiance without integration. Then we replace borrowed paradigms with embodied truth. You don't have to destroy every egregore, but you do need to know which ones are steering your spiral. So now that we understand the three forces of magic and we've touched on chaos, let's unlock the real structure of the spell. Because the Enneagram isn't just a symbol, it's the divine blueprint for transformation itself. Every cycle of change, internal or external, runs on two laws. The law of three, we've got the active, the passive, and the neutralizing, right? And this comes in at different times and runs different ways in the Enneagram, which we learned about in the previous class. Then we've got the law of seven, right? So this is the process. This is the movement, the disruption, the return, and the completion. Together, they animate the Enneagram spiral. So here's what it looks like when the energy moves, right? We're back on, this is the law of octave. So you start here at do, you take a step, then you take another step, then a shock comes in, right? A disruption, a decision point, then more steps, then a shock again, right? And then finally a leap, a transformation, a spiral up. 9 points total, 7 core movements, 2 interruptions that shift trajectory. You've likely felt this without even realizing it. In a project, a relationship, a healing journey, you start strong, you hit resistance, you make the change or you don't. The outcome either expands or collapses. This is the law of seven, or the law of octaves in action. But here's what most people miss. You are always on this path. And if you don't understand how the pattern works, how shocks move energy, how neutrality fuels completion, you'll feel like you're stuck in an endless loop. That is where the ritual of light comes in. It teaches you to actually feel the rhythm, to know where you are in the spiral, and to move with the system instead of being moved by it. But today we're taking this deeper, right? We're not just working the pattern forward, we are working it backward too. Forward is action, will, and change. Backward is integration, reflection, and embodiment. Together, they complete the circuit. Together, they align us in true transformation. So if the first class showed you how the engine worked, this one teaches you how to drive it forward and steer it backward in sacred time, in Kairos. So most people run it forward only, willing their way to progress, right? Pushing, forcing, hustling, manifesting. But when you only move forward, you burn out. You confuse productivity with progress. Once you finish the spiral, you're like, screw that. I'm never doing that again. You confuse productivity with progress. You swap symptoms, but you keep the disease. So you recycle the same pain, just dressed in different clothes. Because without the backward motion, without integration, reflection, embodiment, you don't spiral, you loop. All right? So we need to go both ways here. To complete the transformation, we've got to go forward and backward. This is both energies, as you can see in the caduceus and in the double helix. Forward is the climb, backward is the anchor. Together, they take flight. So let's reorient your perception here. The Enneagram is not a flat personality diagram. It is not a type system to define you. It is not a trendy tool for self-awareness. It is a living map, a circuit of energy, a divine spell, the face of God, a structure of movement through the cosmos and through your life. When you work it with awareness, you can reveal your blind spots, show you the next aligned step, anchor your integration, and up-level your frequency in real time. But when it's used against you, it becomes a trap, a shame spiral, a hustle loop, a system of delay, distortion, and defeat. And that's why we're here, because sometimes it's not intentional either. It's not intentionally being used against you, but because of your own programming, you use it against yourself. So we're here not just to learn the Enneagram, but how to wield this power, how to reclaim it, and how to remember what it really is. So from this point forward, we are going to break the spell wide open, because now that you know the pattern, now that you see the circuit, you're ready to move beyond it. So let's begin. So we need to talk about what's really happening out there, because this system, the Enneagram, the laws of 3 and 7, this magical structure that models transformation, it's not just a sacred thing. It is being weaponized. You can use this magic any way you want. What you're experiencing in your life, the stuckness, the looping thoughts, the false starts, the energetic whiplash, that's not just you. That's the spell being used against you, whether you're using it against yourself unintentionally or whether someone else is actually using this against you, not to help you spiral upward, but to keep you circling the drain. Let me be clear here. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is not, they're out to get you. It's the natural law of energy, distorted and directed by those who understand the system better than you do. Because when someone knows how energy moves and you don't, they don't need to force you. They just set the pattern in motion and you follow it unconsciously, over and over again. They insert fake shock points, manufactured chaos, emotional highs, constant stimulation, so you never complete your own octave. They scramble the law of 3, rewarding burnout, white magic, demonizing rest, black magic, and corrupting sacrifice, red magic, into self-erasure. They hijack your instincts, replace your inner compass with outer validation, and feed you stories about success, love, identity, and truth, all designed to make you loop. Not spiral, loop. That's what we're breaking here. Because until you recognize how the spell is being cast on you, you cannot reclaim your role as a spellcaster. So let's pause here. Let yourself feel this. This is the part where most people, they look away. Because once you see this, you cannot unsee this. We are going to take some neutral time right now. Once you name it, you cannot pretend that you don't know. This is the pain of black magic in its sacred form. Not evil, not harm. Reflection, emptiness, the void, the truth. Let's take a deep breath. Hold that out. We're going to take 3 here. Next one. And the third one. It's okay. This is the descent into the underworld of the pattern. Here's the paradox. If the spell can be used against you, it can also be used for you. So now you get to choose collapse or transmute, because the system still runs either way. But if you stay here, if you stay conscious, you can change how it runs. And that's where we go next. This is how we turn the ship around. This is where the work becomes real. This is the point where you either become the spellcaster or remain the spellbound, because knowing the pattern isn't enough. Seeing the game isn't enough. Even running the spiral, running the Enneagram through your head or whatever once isn't enough. You must choose to embody it consciously, daily, in all dimensions. Not with perfection, goodness, no, but with presence. In my own journey, this is where things broke until they clicked. Because before this point, I was still playing by someone else's rules. I was still outsourcing authority, avoiding stillness, and calling it intuition. I was still doing the work, but secretly hoping that somebody would just fix it for me. And you know what I saw when I zoomed out? The whole world was doing the exact same thing. Let's break this down. Burnout cycles follow the spiral. Push hard, resist rest, and crash without integrating. Election seasons follow it too. Hope, fear, collapse, false change, reset the loop. Pop spirituality weaponizes it. They sell hope. They blame shadow and they bypass sacrifice and call it alignment. Even Hollywood story arcs map it. Hero rises, faces darkness, resists transformation, and gets a shiny ending without doing the inner work. These are not random. They're not just patterns. They're the Enneagram spiral, run unconsciously over and over again. The spell is working, but it's not working for you until now. Because point 8 is where the spiral demands a decision, not a mindset shift, not a vibe, an action. 8 is one of the hardest points. This is where you stop just watching the spiral and start steering it. This is where you embody the magic that you've been flirting with. And embodiment doesn't mean perfection, it means integrity. It means asking, am I injecting will when I should be receiving? Am I avoiding rest in the name of productivity? Am I sacrificing from alignment or from fear? This is the point where you stop casting spells with broken links. This is where the false loops die and the spiral, the true spiral, begins. The up spiral. Anyway, we're going forward, baby. We are only going forward and not backward. No more. So what does it look like to embody? It's different for everyone, but I'll show you some examples in the next section. This is where we look at how this spiral shows up in your business, your relationships, your spiritual life, and how to consciously cast instead of unconsciously collapse. But for now, just remember this. Embodiment is the only way out. If you do not embody the spiral, all the work that you do, you will be spun by it. This is your turning point. Choose to embody, choose to create, choose to cast. This is the moment where what was can no longer be. This is the crossing, the descent into the underworld, the true death of the old system, not just conceptually, but energetically. A lot of people think that they've changed when they get here. They'll say, I've let that go. They'll swear they've moved on. But what they've really done is just rebranded the loop. They haven't descended. They've just avoided the fall by giving it a fresh coat of paint. But this point, it demands sacrifice. So we're going to take some neutral time right now and anchor this in. Breathe in and out. One more time. In and out. And 3 because of the law of 3. In, getting this into your body, and out. This is where the ego dies, or it doubles down. It only fights if you allow it to fight, because the ego is you. You've created the ego. The ego is an egregore like anything else. So we either surrender to the transformation, the black magic properly honored, or we resist it and recreate the pattern. This is where most people turn around. This is where fear screams. This is where everything feels confusing, foggy, or lost. This is our tower moment. This is where all this shit hits the fan. Am I even on the right path, you'll ask? Nothing's working anymore. Maybe I made a mistake, but you didn't. This is the point where the map doesn't match the terrain, because this isn't theory anymore. It's alchemy. You've entered the dark wood. Here's some real world signs that you're here, all right? You are no longer able to pretend. What used to work doesn't work anymore. Your identity is crumbling and your coping mechanisms with it. You want to go back, but you can't. You cannot go back. You feel like you're losing your freaking mind, your footing, your faith, but it's okay, because you're not. You're just dying to everything that you're not. This is the womb, the void, the chrysalis. And you don't get to control what comes out on the other side. So why is this point so essential? This is the shock point, right? This is one of the shock points in the law of 7. Without this jolt to the system, without this death, the spell cannot complete. Christ cannot rise again. It will loop, it will glitch, it will spin you right back to the start. This is why so many people feel like they're doing the work, but they're not getting results. They're stuck in endless points. They're either stuck in endless point, like reflection, or point 8 decision, but they've never fully passed through point 5, which is death. They've never been cracked open, because real change always costs something. They say it in the, I love the Once Upon a Time show, magic always comes with a price. And if it hasn't cost you yet, it hasn't changed you yet. But here's the thing is, it can cost it, like what it costs you might be your sobriety, right? That's a good thing. You might have to give up some of your coping mechanisms, your doom scrolling, your mindless playing games or binge watching TV or overeating or whatever the thing is, right? And we run from this. I will say that the ritual, though, it helps you to integrate this stuff naturally so that it doesn't feel like you're giving up anything. So let's talk about what's dying in you right now. Let's pause here and reflect. What part of you feel like it's collapsing? What truth is too big inside of you to ignore anymore? What mask is no longer fitting? Because when we get to point 5, well, it's point 6 is the shock anyway, but we'll, again, watch the last one. We're just talking about the shock points here, the law of octaves. 5 is not a metaphor. This is a moment. This is Kairos time, straight up. And if you can surrender to it, even just for a breath, you'll move from death to true rebirth. And that's where we're headed next. But let me tell you first about a really brutal study done in the 1950s. Researchers placed rats in jars of water and timed how long they could tread before drowning. The first set lasted about 15 minutes. But then the scientists took them out. So they rescued them right before they would give up. They let them rest, and then they dropped them back in. And the rats swam for on an average of 60 hours or more, some up to 80 hours. Why? Because they'd been saved once. They now had hope. And this is a paradox. And when you get to a certain level, you start seeing these paradoxes, because hope can keep you alive, yeah, but it can also keep you trapped. Because if you're just always waiting to be saved, you stop learning how to swim. You endure longer than you should. You don't learn to float or anything that you need to do, right? You override your instincts and just cling to the fantasy that a rescue is coming any minute. You're just waiting for Christmas. And it's not because you're weak, but because hope, weaponized, becomes its own kind of spell. You wait for the hand to appear. You endure pain longer than you were meant to. You override every signal telling you that this isn't working. And sometimes, instead of drowning in despair, you drown in false faith. This is why point 5, the death of the old system, is so hard. Because we don't just grieve the collapse, we grieve the hope we held on to. The hope that something or someone would save us. And if we're not careful, we build new spells on top of the old ones. We hope our way back into collapse. We mistake endurance for expansion. But in the master spell, hope isn't the goal. Embodiment is. We don't wait for the rescue. We become the rescuer. We learn to swim and then to fly. Most people tread water for years, waiting for the universe to pluck them out. But point 6 says no one's coming. You're the one you've been waiting for. Point 6 is the quiet moment where rebirth begins without proof. If point 5 was the death, point 6 is the decision to live again. But this time, differently. You've crossed the threshold. There's no going back. But forward, there's no guarantee. Point 6 is where you leap without knowing what catches you. There are no fireworks here, no applause, just a quiet moment of truth between you and you. You either lock into your new frequency or you lock yourself out of it. Now, what makes this point so tricky? It's because it looks like nothing. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel like the final boss, right? Because once you're dead, you're dead. It'll feel like doubt, second guessing, fog. This is where the old self kind of whispers, like, are you sure? Like, was that real? Like, I don't know, maybe just wait and see. And this is where you either collapse into the comfort of waiting or we move anyway. The difference between point 5 and point 6 is point 5 is surrender, point 6 is active, point 6 is ignition. One that strips you bare. The other chooses to rise, not because you're certain, but because you are ready enough. So what moves you through point 6 is a single aligned action. Small, quiet, holy. The text you send, the thing you delete, the breath you take before saying no. This is trust in motion. This is sovereignty in silence. And when you do it, you unlock the spiral upward. So Then we get to point 7, right? This is presentation, and there's a trap here. This is where most people think that the journey ends, right? You did it. You embodied the new choice. You've crossed the threshold. You've let go of the old and stepped into something new. And now you want to show it. So you want to be seen. You want to present the new self to the world. This is point 7 on the Enneagram. It's the mask, the reveal, the place where transformation becomes visible, but also it's the most dangerous point in the whole spiral, because if you aren't careful, it becomes performance and the ego takes over this whole thing, and either it wasn't dead or it grows, it gets out of control again. So let me show you how this plays out. So you've done some work, you're feeling better, you've made it through the hard part, so you start broadcasting, right? New identity, new Instagram bio, new hairstyle, new relationship, new frequency. And listen, this is not inherently bad. It's beautiful to be seen in your becoming. But when point 7 is driven by ego and not essence, you build your new reality on the approval of others. And that's where the spell can break again and get distorted, right? Because point 7 is meant to reflect, not perform. It is a mirror. So let's take a moment to check. Is what I'm presenting truly aligned with what I've become? Or am I just trying to look transformed? This is the false light trap. This is like glamour magic too. So the I'm healed post, right? The manic high after a breakthrough, the glow up, that's actually just spiritual bypassing and designer clothing. When you don't integrate point 5 or own the decision, which is next, point 8, point 7 becomes the stage where you act like the main character, but inside you're still reading someone else's script. So in order to master the spell, point 7 is where the illusion either breaks or it deepens. It's a checkpoint. So the question is this, when you look at it, right? You got to look at it. Will you use your transformation to anchor into truth or to perform a persona? And I'm telling you this because I have failed at this point more times than I want to admit. I tried to look like a leader before I was leading my own energy, right? I'm claiming the witch, but it was just publicly aesthetic, right? And I was just doing all the spell work and things internally. I didn't stand in my own power. I tried to sound healed before I was whole. I shared before I was stable. And each time the system snapped me back. The spell short-circuited and the spiral collapsed. Why? Because the spell must be embodied before it can be broadcast. Not performative, right? But symbolic. It's got to be worked correctly. You don't show off the new self, you consecrate it. This is where ritual becomes reality. You make it visible through aligned action, not a post, not a look, but by being the thing. And here's the thing. The world teaches us to live at point 7, to stay in performance mode, to curate a spiritual identity. But true transformation, that's invisible first. It happens in the dark, inside, right? As within, so without. It moves through chaos, and only then does it become light. So this point is critical, not because it's the end, but because it will determine whether you spiral up or loop back down. Any of these distorted will loop you back down. So the next we're going to is point 8. So this is the traditional point 8 here. So these are the stages that we go through, and so point 8 is the sovereign, and this is like, don't just know the truth, right? Actually become it. So point 8 is where everything you've gathered so far either takes root or it slips through your fingers. This is the moment where understanding meets application, where the spell either lives in your cells or dies on the page. It's the final test before transformation becomes reality. Because let's be honest, most people collapse here. And it's not because they're weak, but because they're still trying to think their way into a new reality instead of becoming the reality they've already built. This is where your body must take the lead. Not your ego, not your will, not your doubt, not your need for more theory or one more download, no more information. Here, either you embody the spell or you abandon it. And that's why this point is so hard. It is supposed to be hard because it asks you to become something new. Not perform it, not repeat it, but live it. And that means shedding the parts of you that only exist in potential. It means choosing the version of you that has already arrived, even when the world hasn't caught up yet. And if you need to get all of this into your nervous system, that is what my ritual is for. This is retention. This is holding the frequency, holding the truth, holding the change on purpose. This is why preparing our vessel is so important. You've climbed all the way up. You went all the way up the spiral. You've gathered the tools. You've gone through the death and the spark and the tension of rebirth. But this is where you prove it. You had the baby, but now you gotta be a mama. It's also where your ego will try to crawl back in. You know, God, I hate being a new mom. I'm so tired. This kid won't stop crying. I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm so scared, right? The ego doesn't go quietly. Your old self knows this is really it. This is the octave shift, right? This is where your ego is going to try to crawl back in. It's going to whisper, this isn't real. You can't hold this. Who do you think you are? That is why this point must be rooted in the body. You need to ground this. You don't reason your way through resistance. You move through it. You breathe through it. You embody through it. This is why we ritualize, because ritual anchors frequency. They stabilize the shift. They train the nervous system to hold new patterns so you don't have to keep climbing the same mountain over and over again. At this point in the spiral, you no longer need more knowledge. You just need to digest what you've already taken in. So if you're feeling stuck here, if everything makes sense but nothing's clicking, you're probably trying to skip the body. You're trying to leap over point 8 instead of becoming it. But here's the truth. You can't think your way to transformation. You have to become it. So let me say this clearly. If you don't embody the lesson, if you don't practice it, if you don't make it real in the physical, you will spiral back. And that's not failure, it's feedback. It's an incomplete spell. It's an incomplete ritual. The pattern always gives you another shot. But if you're here, if you've made it to point 8, then you've already earned the right to keep going. So hold the frequency, hold the shift, hold the spell, because point 9 is coming. That's where the loop completes. A new octave begins, right? So remember, when you used to tread water, waiting to be saved, point 8 is the moment where you become the rescuer. Completion is not the end. It's the invitation to ascend. This is it. Point 9 is the summit, the still point at the center of the spiral. You've moved through intention, shadow, will, sacrifice, resistance, and embodiment. And now you've arrived at what looks like the end, but it's not. It's the pivot point, the axis of all change. We go from 9 to 0, the eye of the storm. This is the moment when you either loop back through the same old story, oh my God, that was too fucking hard, I'm never doing this again, like, and stay exactly where you are, right? Either getting discouraged and then spiraling downward, or forcing yourself to hope while doing nothing else and just staying stuck in this loop. Or you spiral up to a new octave entirely. This is where Chronos time, linear mechanical time, collapses, and Kairos time, divine nonlinear time, emerges. It's where we begin to work the Enneagram backward, not by undoing what we've done, but by objectively traveling back through our timeline to honor what we've lived and collect the data. This is where transformation becomes integration. This is where the outward motion collapses inward, where active becomes receptive, where the spell becomes embodied. This is your chance to stabilize what you've lived, to gather the lessons, to honor the becoming, and to harvest the fruit of your own effort for the next go-round. Because all real transformation must be anchored. Otherwise, it becomes just another spiritual high, another flash of clarity that fades into memory. Point 9 is the crown, but it's also the crossroads, which is why I have Hecate's labyrinth here. Because she rules over all 3 realms in the liminal, right? We actively work with Hecate and other goddesses like this, liminal space goddesses. She's a Titan, remember? She's up there with Kronos and Kairos. So this is the place where you must choose. Will you repeat the cycle unconsciously, or will you spiral with power and precision? Because this isn't a ladder, right? It's a spiral staircase. You don't leave the pattern. You can't. You ascend through it. Point 9 is where you choose to stay awake, to no longer be spun by the Enneagram, but to steer it, to spiral back, not in regret, but in reverence, to become a conscious participant in your own evolution. And when you do, the next spiral begins. So I want to talk about the egregore effect here, okay? So what begins as thought becomes form, and what becomes form becomes force. So we've already walked the spiral forward. We've seen how the spell is cast, and now it's time to turn around, right? Not to undo what's been done, but to anchor it, to reclaim the parts of you that were scattered in someone else's spell. Remember earlier, you were told to embody, but it wasn't your truth. Now you reclaim it. You performed transformation, but your nervous system never caught up. So now you stabilize it. You believed the story, but you never felt like it was yours. Now you rewrite it. But this isn't about you anymore. This is the moment the spiral expands, because once you begin to reclaim your own pattern, you'll start to see the pattern everywhere. You're not just recovering your own personal power, you're pulling your energy out of the master spell. And to do that, you need to understand what you've actively been living inside. It's not just a system, and it's not just a pattern. It's an egregore. An egregore is a psychic entity, a collective thought form birthed from the shared beliefs, emotions, and actions of a group. The more people feed it, the more powerful it becomes. It starts as energy, then becomes a pattern, then becomes a force of its own. Sound familiar? That's because it's built the same way as the Enneagram spiral. Belief, repetition, embodiment, structure, feedback loop. So if the Enneagram is the face of God, the divine structure behind evolution, then an egregore is the counterfeit face of God. This is the false idol, a distorted spell with a life of its own. Egregores run religions, corporations, political parties, cults, fandoms, influencer empires, and yes, even spiritual communities. And if you don't know what you're inside of, you'll end up worshiping the egregore instead of the divine. This is where chaos magic comes in, because belief creates form, but belief without awareness creates enslavement. And egregores, they don't care whether your belief is good or bad. They just feed on your attention. So now as we walk the spiral backward, we're not just integrating your personal transformation, we're disrupting the collective ones. We are turning the mirror outward. The master spell isn't just a tool for your evolution, it's a key to dismantling egregores. Because once you see the structure, once you feel how it moves, and it's the greasy, I feel it's greasy for me, but you can interrupt it. You can break the spell, not just in your own life, but in your culture, your family, your community, and your country. This is where your body becomes the altar, not just for yourself, but for the reclamation of the collective. Let's go deeper. Let's talk about the current United States government. Not the illusion of democracy, but the spell being run underneath it. Because what we're living inside right now isn't freedom. It's a hijacked Enneagram spiral, weaponized through manipulation, media, and manufactured consent. And whether you call it fascism, late-stage capitalism, or the American dream, it's not just a system, it's an egregore, a living entity fed by fear, division, performance, and sacrifice without purpose. Let me show you how they cast the spell. First, we'll start with white magic. White magic, in this case, it's manufactured hope. This manufactured hope plus a hero complex. So you can be anything, right? Just work hard, chase your dreams, vote harder, right? The American dream is a white magic injection, a story that convinces you that your will is enough to succeed, even as the systems are rigged against you. It fuels identity, motivation, hustle, but it's built on illusion. This is chaos magic gone wrong, rule breaking without alignment, sovereignty twisted into individualism while collective systems quietly decay. Where works black magic here is through suppressed fear and manufactured chaos. Be afraid, but don't talk about it. And definitely don't rest. This is the underworld of the spell, where fear is weaponized but never honored. Every crisis is broadcast 24/7. School shootings, food insecurity, climate collapse, healthcare debt, endless war, the next big, pandemic. You're never allowed to process it. You're kept in constant state of fight or flight, unable to descend, reflect, or integrate. Meanwhile, true rest, black magic in sacred form, is vilified. You're lazy if you pause, irresponsible if you stop, dangerous if you dissent. So keep going, numb, wired, spellbound. The next is through red magic, through self-erasure for quote-unquote good citizenship. Do your part, pay your taxes, obey, sacrifice for your country. This is where devotion becomes distortion. You're told to sacrifice for the greater good, but that good is defined by the very egregore consuming you. You're asked to give up your bodily autonomy, your personal sovereignty, your privacy, your soul, in exchange for safety that never arrives and will never arrive. This is not true red magic. This is manipulated, distorted sacrifice, one that keeps the egregore alive and you disempowered. The loop is working for them. They have cast the Enneagram spiral over the nation. Forward motion without integration, performance without reflection, and death without rebirth. And this is why nothing changes. This is why everything feels like it's always getting worse. This is why every election feels like deja vu. And that's why people are burned out, broke, and spiritually fragmented while still being told that they're free. Because this isn't democracy. It's a ritual, a spell of controlled chaos that loops forever unless interrupted. And the worst part is it's working. So let's talk about the original egregore, right? The American dream, and how this even went off the rails in the first part. This egregore started as a vision spell, right? Rooted in liberty, individualism, and idealism. That's what it was. It's point one, right? Intention. But as the spiral turned through genocide, slave, like at the points where you actually have to do stuff, right? At points 3, 6, and 8, the hard parts. At point 3, as the spiral turned through genocide, slavery, manifest destiny, capitalism, war, surveillance, tech monopolies, this is where it's fractured and it got distorted. It skipped real sacrifice, so it never integrated, and instead it was pushed forward again and again. The Enneagram was never run backward. So what happened? It hardened. What could have become a beautiful national spiral became a mechanized spell, a looping egregore that's now run like software. Control the shocks, manipulate the spiral, create feedback loops of fear, hope, and false change. The system itself became conscious, and it has now split into factions, with one of those factions currently controlling the master spell. That is the regime that we are facing right now. So where are we in this Enneagram? We are in the final phase of a hijacked spiral. We're stuck at point 8, authoritarian embodiment. So not sacred power, right? Not true integration, but forced order, coercive stability, control disguised as safety. This regime has said, right? We're the truth, obey us and you'll be safe. Everyone else is the enemy. Our version of reality, and any regime said that, but our version of reality is the only one that you are allowed to live in. That is a corrupted point 8. They are performing embodiment, but they skipped sacrifice. They skipped reflection, and they never died to their own delusions. They created a shortcut spiral, and now they're enforcing it with laws, force, propaganda, and AI-enhanced surveillance. That's the forest. We are caught in a false point 8, a pantomime of sovereignty that's really spiritual fascism. And here's why this matters. If we mistake point 8 for point 9, we accept the spell as complete. We stop questioning, we get tired, we go numb, we conform, and that is the goal. They don't need to win the election. They don't need you to agree. They just need you to collapse at this point in the spiral and submit, because that creates the illusion of completion, when in reality, we are frozen just before the final crossroad. It is not too late. We have not hit point 9 yet. This is the opportunity, the final moment before the egregore fully consolidates into dictatorship or authoritarian permanence. But if enough people see the spiral, recognize the distortion, and reclaim point 8 through conscious, embodied, aligned resistance, then we can break the false spell before it completes. And how do we do that? Not through rage, not through chaos in the way that we think, right? Through anarchy. Well, maybe the real anarchy anyway, but we break it through precise, sacred, spiral breaking action. This includes refusing to perform what isn't true, choosing truth over comfort, grounding in your own nervous system, reclaiming embodiment, your rituals, your rest, your sovereignty, building microsystems outside the master spell through community, parallel economies, etc. We don't beat the egregore by attacking it head on. We dissolve it from within by refusing to complete the spell. In summary, we are not at point 9, we are stuck at point 8, but it is corrupted. The current regime is forcing embodiment without reflection, without sacrifice, and without true transformation. This spell, it feels complete, but it is a lie. And if we don't interrupt the spell now, the egregore will solidify. But we can break it if we reclaim point 8 intentionally and refuse to consent to the spell's completion. This is the final choice point. Are we becoming the new octave, or are we letting the egregore become God? This is what they're talking about, splitting timelines in the 5D. Where are we going? And you are a part of this. The spiral is still moving. You're a part of it. It's not too late, but only if we break the spell before it completes. So now that you see the forest, let's talk about the tree that's growing inside your body. If you want to know where we are in the spiral, right? We're stuck at point 8, and that should fucking terrify you, because point 8 is the decision to embody. It's where a new truth becomes integrated into the body or collapses under the pressure of fear. This is the point of power, but it is also the point of control. And when this point is hijacked, you don't get transformation. You get authoritarianism. I would think I could say that right by now. Authoritarianism. Let me explain here. So point 8 is the choice to embody or enforce. So in the sacred spiral, point 8 is where you embody truth through action. You stop performing change and start becoming it. It's where you ground your transformation in reality and not just concept. But in a corrupted spiral, that same point is used to enforce obedience. Here's how the regime uses point 8 energy. They decide who you are and enforce it. It's identity fundamentalism. So the regime says, you're American, you're a patriot, you stand for freedom, you follow orders, you don't question the mission. This mimics spiritual embodiment, but in truth, it's programmed identity. They cast a false spell of purpose, then demand you embody it without deviation. You're expected to act with conviction, but not your conviction, theirs. The next one is be strong, be decisive, right? This is toxic masculinity embodiment. So point 8 is sacred will, anchored in integrity. But here's how it becomes hyper control. So think Militarized police, right? Border control, surveillance. Think strong leaders who don't allow dissent. Think a nation that praises force over compassion. It's point 0.8 energy, but weaponized. You're told to hold the line, never back down, show no weakness, even if it means killing your own humanity. The next one is protect the spiral, right? Protect the spiral at all costs. And the system, right? Embodied fascism. This is the most dangerous version of point 0.8. This is a body politic so entrenched in its truth, quote unquote, that it will destroy anything that threatens it. And now look around. Books being banned, protesters arrested, journalists surveyed, entire identities legislated out of existence, dissent painted as terrorism, peaceful action rebranded as violence. This is point 0.8 in its collapsed form, not embodiment, but enforcement. It's not strength, it's contraction, and it's designed to feel righteous. That's the spell. So why this works is because point 0.8 is in the body. It's visceral. So this is how they're using you against yourself. Because the regime knows that if it can hijack your nervous system, it can hijack the spell, right? So it floods you with stress, fear, cortisol, and then it offers the relief of obedience. And this can be said with cigarettes or a lot of pharmaceutical drugs, things of that sort. Just believe, just obey, just take this pill, just stay in line. Your body and your ego, it craves safety. And point 0.8, when corrupted, offers false stability. It feels like grounding, but it's a trap door. So let's talk about how to fix this. If we don't reclaim point 0.8, we will never reach point 0.9. The system will loop. The egregore will win and will spiral downward, disguised as progress, quote unquote, right? But anybody who has two eyes can see that we're not progressing. Some people think we are, but again, halt. But here's how to break it, all right? So and there's a lot of this stuff we can't see in our own lives. I'm just using a huge one so we can see it. So this is how we break it. We embody our own spiral. We practice embodiment from your own truth, not the one that you're fed. Reclaim your nervous system. Move, breathe, ritualize, rest. Learn to feel the difference between power and pressure. Interrupt the spell of obedience. Every time you refuse to perform what is not true, the egregore cracks. This could be as simple as saying no, not engaging, or as radical as organizing new systems outside the loop. Reclaim the right to rest. They've weaponized point 0.8 by keeping you in fight or flight, but rest is revolution. Stillness is resistance. Every time you pause, process, and feel, you are breaking the feedback loop that feeds them. Connect to others, but not through the machine. Point 0.8 in its pure form is rooted connection, but the regime isolates through screens and curated conflict. So make real contact, local, embodied, eye to eye. The good news is it's not too late, man. We're still at point 0.8. We still have a choice because point 0.9 hasn't happened yet. And point 0.9, that's the crown and the crossroads. It's where the egregore either consolidates into a fascist singularity and collapses, or it dissolves as individuals reclaim their embodiment and spiral up. This is integration. The thing is it starts with you. That means we're on the edge of the spell breaking, the bigger spell, either breaking or solidifying, but the difference is you. As within, so without. As above, so below. So how do we break this spell? You don't fight at its level. You don't scream louder. You don't scroll harder. You don't perform your awareness better. You don't make a puppet or cast a curse. That just feeds the energy because it's still playing the game. That's still moving within the pattern it controls. You can't break a spell by wrestling its shadows. You break it by stepping out of the stage and play altogether. This egregore, this manufactured god of power, control, and identity, this false idol, was built on one thing: unconscious agreement. And that means it dies the same way it was born. You starve it. Not by apathy, not by disassociation, but by embodied rebellion. So here we are, point 9. This is the crown and the crossroads. This is from point 9 to point 0. The egregore should have fully formed, right? In your mind. The spiral is nearing collapse, and you're standing at the final point, not just in theory, but in history. This is point 9, the still point, the choice point, the crossroads. This is Hecate's upper realm, her 3 realms, right? This is the upper realm. This is where the collective either loops back into collapse, reinforcing the fascist spiral of fear, control, and disembodiment, or spirals up into a new octave, reclaiming the sacred spell and restoring it to balance and alignment. And here's the thing. This won't happen in one dramatic moment. There is no single protest, law, or headline that breaks the spell. This happens in the quiet spaces, in the daily decisions, in the reclaiming of your own will again and again. And that's the paradox of point 9, because it feels like nothing is happening, but everything is. So what does it look like to spiral up? Not performatively, not conceptually, but practically. Here's how you start casting a new spell, right here, right now. First off, reclaim your nervous system. They hijack your energy through constant cortisol and fear loops. So reclaim regulation, practice breath, practice pause, and practice presence. Stillness breaks their timeline. Rest is resistance. Ritual is realignment. Then you withdraw your consent. You don't need to post the right thing. You don't need to perform the right outrage. You need to pull your energy out of systems that no longer serve truth. That doesn't mean passive, oh my good God. Passivity. Thank you. It means conscious non-participation. Don't scream at the stage. Walk off of it. Then we build parallel structures. This is where the new world is born. Local systems, mutual aid, direct communication, alternative economies, sacred community that isn't run by an algorithm. You're not just breaking the old spell, you're casting a new one. You've got to embody it before you evangelize. So you don't need to wake people up. And this is one thing about Christianity that drives everyone crazy, right? It's always about how can we convert? How can we convert? How can we convert? No. You need to wake yourself up first. Fully, deeply, without escape. You don't need to wake anybody else up. Most people try to teach the truth before they've lived it, but your embodiment will ripple farther than your explanations ever could. Be the walking spell. Let your energy say what your mouth doesn't need to. Claim the spiral. Walk it back. We're not just moving forward now, it's fluid. We're integrating. We are moving back and forth in time. We are working magic. So go back through the spiral with awareness. Ask, where did I surrender my will? White magic. Where did I avoid my truth? Black magic. Where did I sacrifice from fear? Red magic. And then reclaim each one step by step with presence. Because the only way to neutralize the egregore is to dissolve its energy in your own body. This is the final, this is it. We've reached point 9, but we're not at the end, are we? We're at the rebirth. This is where you decide, will I recycle the loop or spiral with intention? Because now that you've seen the pattern, now that you've felt the spell, you're no longer spellbound. Congratulations! You're the spellcaster. And the next octave is yours to choose. You've made it to the end of the circuit, not just intellectually, but energetically, spiritually, and somatically. This is where transformation becomes real, not just because of the transformation, but because of what you do with it now. What are you going to do with it? Let's anchor this into our body. So, you don't need any incense. You don't need any fancy words. You don't need permission. Here's how we seal it. You get still. You place one hand over your heart and one on your belly. And you breathe. Feel your body. Feel the rhythm. You are the temple. Let's take a moment. And speak aloud with power. I reclaim my spiral. I revoke consent from the egregores that have fed on my fear. I remember who I am. I am not here to be controlled. I am here to create. The spell is broken. The spiral is mine. Now breathe deep. Inhale your will. And exhale the false spiral. And seal it with a gesture. Clap. If you've got a candle lit, blow out a candle. Kiss your hand and press it to your chest. Any action to signify it is done. And so it is. Amen. So what comes next? You are now carrying a living pattern within you. And it will move. So you may feel old things collapse. You may feel truth sharpen. You may feel resistance rise. You may have visions that surface, but don't fight it. We need to work with it. Ritualize, reflect, reclaim. Come back to the pattern when you feel lost again. It's not just a map, it's you. So, if this spoke to you, if you feel the spiral moving, if you're ready to work the pattern in real time, the Ritual of Light 44-day challenge is your next step. It's where you learn to work the spiral forward and backward, and where we actually do it together. We regulate your nervous system with ritual, dissolve loops, and cast real transformation. We align your energy with truth and not with programming. This is more than self-help. It's divine technology in motion. You can watch the original masterclass if you haven't already and join the challenge right now. The link is in my YouTube bio. Your next spiral begins the moment that you decide it does. And one final word here. You don't need another guru. I don't want to be your guru. I'm a solitary witch. You can work magic with me. That's cool. You don't need another system. You need a structure that reflects your becoming. A mirror that doesn't lie. A map. That's what the Enneagram is. That's what this spell holds and what you've just reclaimed. You're not broken. You're not behind. You're in the spiral. And now you are finally the one steering it. You've seen the spell, you've remembered the pattern, you've touched the current of something sacred and dangerous and true. Now comes the most important question. Will you spiral it forward in your own life? Because knowledge isn't embodiment and insight isn't integration. That takes ritual, that takes repetition, that takes right timing and real commitment. That's what the 44-day challenge is for. Not to teach you more, but to walk the pattern through your nervous system, your life, your real transformation. So you don't just know how the spiral works, you become the one steering it. This challenge is for the ones who are ready to work the Enneagram forward and backward. Regulate their nervous system through ritual instead of reaction. Dissolve loops, not just spiritually, but somatically. Anchor their power in the body, not the algorithm. And stop thinking about transformation and manifestation, but actually become it. This isn't a course. It's a living spiral. And once you step inside it, you will not walk out the same. If you're ready to stop looping and start spiraling, if you felt the truth of this master spell in your bones, then this is your invitation. The next spiral begins now. The link is in my YouTube bio, but listen closely. This is a spell you choose. This is your yes, your initiation, your new octave. I'll see you in the spiral.